Now tell me if this has happened to you before. At home, when you're practicing, your English is great. Your vocabulary is varied and interesting and appropriate to what you're talking about. Your sentence structures are complex and developed. Your fluency is fantastic. You're able to flow and speak effectively in English. But then, as soon as you're into that exam situation, it's gone. You can't think of anything apart from basic vocabulary. You're using very short, simple sentences all the time, and as soon as you're trying to get an idea out of your head, the words just won't come. Now, this isn't just you. This is normal, and it happens to everyone. So in today's video, looking at fluency, we're going to be talking about the ways that stress can impact our fluency, impact our performance, and really hurt us in exam situations. The thing that you need to remember about stress is it is a normal human response. It happens to us in all kinds of different situations. Now, in an exam, you've probably experienced most of the ways that it can affect us already. And it is so frustrating. You know that you know the language. You know that you can do better, but for some reason you aren't performing to that level you know you're capable of. A good way to understand what's happening to you is to think about it this way. Your body can't really distinguish between types of stressful situations. So your body is responding in the same way when you're in an exam as they would when you were in a situation, like for example, if a lion is chasing you. Imagine you're a wild animal and a lion is chasing you. What does your body do to respond? Well, it's going to do things like it's going to increase your heart rate and it's going to release chemicals and things into your body that are going to help you escape from the lion. But what it's not necessarily going to do is improve your memory or your thinking ability. We don't really need to think a huge amount if we're running away from the lion. We just need lots of energy and we need to be able to react quickly. So the unfortunate effect of your body treating all stress the same way is that it can have quite a bad effect on our ability to perform in any situation when we need to think. Things like your access to memory are going to be lower. Your ability to maintain long trains of thought are going to be lower. When we're running away from a lion, we don't need to have long, complex sets of ideas at once. We need some short, very simple ideas like run away. So for something like IELTS, this is quite important. We are losing some of our memory ability when we're under stress. So recall of vocabulary is going to be much, much harder. If you've been in an exam, you know exactly what I mean. Remembering those items of vocabulary that you know becomes a very hard thing to do. Similarly, maintaining an organized flow of your talk, keeping your ideas linked together becomes much, much harder. We often need to pause and hesitate much more due to stress because we're not able to maintain these long, complex chains of ideas. These are all things that actually have a big, big impact on our fluency. Another way that stress can impact us on exam day for our fluency is stress can kind of make us question things that we would normally not really think about. So let me give you an example. Imagine if I have a normal wooden plank, a normal piece of wood about this wide, quite long. If I put that on the floor and I ask you to walk across it, it's probably quite an easy thing to do. You wouldn't really think about it, you just walk in a straight line. Now imagine I took the same piece of wood, But instead of it being on the floor, I put it across 2 buildings. So there is a long drop underneath you. Now, if you try to walk across that plank, it becomes very difficult to do. Balancing is going to be hard. Everything is going to be harder because of the stressful situation. So whereas in a normal situation, you might just be able to have a chat in English with another person, in an exam situation, all the time your brain is going to be asking yourself, is my grammar correct? Is that word used correctly? Oh, is the definition correct here? All of these extra questions that you're going to be asking yourself, which are going to interrupt your flow. There's nothing we can really do about this. It's a normal response to stress. All right, let's leave the science behind. To be honest, you know what it feels like already. I don't need to tell you. So let's think about what is it that the examiner is actually picking up? And more importantly, what can you do to help you manage stress in an exam situation? Well, in terms of the IELTS marking criteria, there's no criteria that the examiner is going to measure you on that is labelled stress. But as we've kind of hinted at already, there are several of the criteria that the examiners do mark that stress is going to impact. Now, the first one is hesitation. As we already mentioned, you're allowed to have some hesitations. You can get a very high fluency and coherence score with hesitations if they are hesitations to think about content. If they're hesitations where you are searching for grammar or vocabulary, the examiner will note these and they will count against you. The examiner can tell the difference between these 2 types of hesitation surprisingly easily. Unfortunately, these kind of stress-induced hesitations generally look like searches for vocabulary or grammar. So this is one of the big areas, hesitations. The next one is actually kind of moving across into your lexical resource score, but it's your ability to access vocabulary. Again, we've already mentioned it a little bit, but stress makes it much harder for us to find the right word. This causes hesitations, which impacts our fluency, and of course it impacts the range of our vocabulary. We're not able to access as many words. We can't demonstrate good lexical range, which is the term the examiners use for how wide your vocabulary is. So that's another big area. Another area that the examiner is going to pick up on is to do with self-correction. Now, just like when we were talking about the plank earlier on, when we're stressed, our brain kind of forces us to double-check things that we're doing. It's a way to keep us safe in dangerous situations. The problem is that in a speaking exam, this can be quite harmful. It breaks up the flow of what we're saying. There's nothing wrong with self-correction. In fact, sometimes self-correction can actually be quite helpful for your vocabulary or your grammar use. It helps to improve your accuracy. It shows that you're aware when you've made errors, and self-correction on its own is a normal part of speech. We all do it. The problem is when we have this stress-induced self-correction, often it is breaking up the flow of what we are saying. Too many of these self-corrections can ruin a speaking turn. And this can really show up for the examiner's scores. And all of this comes down to this main idea, the flow of our speech. When we talk about these hesitations or these self-corrections, it's coming down to the same thing. It's interrupting our natural speaking rhythm. And this is something the examiner is always going to pick up on, and it's something that's going to impact your ability to get the highest scores. The final way that stress could really impact what the examiner sees from you in the exam is not an individual negative thing. It's much more, it's going to limit your ability to do a positive thing. Now, in the exam, especially if you're pushing up into the higher bands, you're going to need to show a kind of relaxed, natural way of speaking with the examiner. I always say that the more the exam is like a conversation with a friend, the more likely you are to get a high score. And the problem is stress really impacts your ability to have that kind of relaxed, informal, spontaneous conversation. Your responses are going to be much more formal and serious. You're not going to have that kind of friendly, relaxed mood that's so important if you want to get anything above a band 7. So the final thing that stress is really going to do that the examiner is going to pick up on is it's going to limit your ability to be relaxed and spontaneous and to have a friendly conversation. So the examiner is going to be picking up on all of these things. What can you do to help improve your performance? Well, on one side, the first thing to say is it's quite hard to remove stress completely. In fact, it's nearly impossible. It is a normal part of being human that in high stakes, high pressure environments, we feel stressed. No one performs as well in their IELTS assessment as they can do when they are practicing. This is just a fact. But that doesn't mean you can't do things to reduce the impact that stress has on you. Now, the basic advice, which is what everyone will give, is true, but it's also useless. The basic advice that almost every IELTS tutor will say is be confident. Confidence is the biggest and most effective way of defeating stress. Telling someone to be confident is a pretty useless piece of advice on its own. We can't choose to feel confident. Now, you can try to put yourself in the right mindset, but it is quite difficult. So the way that I prefer to think about it is like this. Confidence is largely about familiarity. The more we do something, the more confident we are. That's a normal rule for life. The more we practice anything, the less likely we are to feel nervous or stressed when we are doing it. The first time you do almost anything, it is going to feel more stressful than the 40th time you are doing something. That's just common sense. But there is a really important message here. If you want to reduce your stress in the IELTS exam, you need to increase your familiarity. You need to practice. So there are a few key things you can do. Number 1, try to simulate test situations as much as you can. If possible, find someone to sit in and pretend to be an examiner with you. Try to put yourself in that situation as frequently as you can. Now, I guarantee, because I've seen it happen with many, many students over the years, once a student has done 20 mock tests, they find the real test significantly more easy. You need to not just practice your speaking, but practice speaking under exam conditions. Once the exam conditions become something that is normal or usual, a lot of the impact of the exam day experience will be reduced. And another thing that many students have told me has worked over the years is to record yourself. Now, on one hand, recording yourself is good because it allows you to hear back the things you did well and the things you did slightly less well. But the other thing is it adds a little bit of pressure. And that little bit of pressure can really help us to prepare for exam situations. We respond differently if we know something is being recorded to if we think we are speaking and no one will be able to remember what we've said. So even if you are on your own, even if you can't find someone to practice with, simply recording yourself when you practice can have a real impact on your ability to reduce stress on exam day. Another thing that can sometimes be quite helpful is to try and practice with stranger or less familiar questions. You can go online and find lots of IELTS questions quite easily, and some of them are a little bit harder than others. Practice with those questions. Practice with the vocabulary areas that you are not normally comfortable with. Try and put yourself outside your comfort zone as much as you can in terms of the questions you are answering. It has a small impact, but again, it can really help to make you feel a little bit more confident on exam day if you know you've already been through the weirdest and wackiest IELTS questions that are available. Now, my final piece of advice is actually not about practice, but it's probably the most important bit of advice I can give you for dealing with stress on exam day. Don't worry if you aren't perfect. Stop chasing perfection. No one who has ever taken an IELTS exam has been perfect. Every single person who has taken the exam before you has had that same exam day stress. They have all made mistakes. They have all done things that were perhaps not as good as they could do them on a normal day. But that's fine. So I've seen people over the years who have made big mistakes early on and gone on to get a very good score. But I've also seen people who've made quite minor mistakes and it has affected them and their confidence so much that the rest of their exam was really way, way below the level it could have been. Stop chasing perfection. The other thing is, of course, if you are worrying so much about being perfect, we're going to get much more of those breaks in the flow of our speech. There's going to be much more of the hesitations, and there's going to be more of the searches for vocabulary, and there's going to be more self-corrections that are really going to break up the flow of your speech. If you make a little minor error, please don't let it worry you. Just move on, and if you do that, you're probably going to be fine. So then, if your English is not quite as good as you want it to be on an exam day, don't worry, it's normal. If your fluency is impacted by nervousness and stress, don't worry, it's normal. The key thing is to practice as much as you can. Make the exam as familiar as possible, and to be relaxed if you make a mistake. Keep your flow going, and your fluency score will be as high as it can be, even though you are in a stressful environment. So for now, that wraps up our series looking at fluency. But in our next video, we're going to be shifting across to the other half of this first speaking criteria. We're going to be talking about coherence. And in my experience, this is one of the aspects of the IELTS speaking marking that people misunderstand the most. So until then, I wish you all the very best of luck in the preparations for your IELTS tests.